Guys, it's Miss Carter, and if you are not in my math class, I hope you will hang out with me for about 10 minutes here. We are going to do a flipped learning, and if you've never done flipped learning before, all it means is that you are starting to learn the skill outside of the classroom, so when you come to class, we have more time to practice together. So today we are going to work on multiplying and dividing decimals by powers of 10. And I know you worked on this last week with whole numbers, so this will just take it a little bit further. Alright, so before we begin, I just want to review our places because you already know our places before the decimal point. These are the places you've been working with forever. So we have our ones, tens, hundreds, and it could go on to thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions. It could go forever. But to the right of the decimal point, behind the decimal point, you might not have seen these places yet. So our very first place is called the tenths place. And pay attention to that TH at the end, because when we write and talk about these places behind the decimal point, all of them have a TH. So we have the tenths, the hundredths, the thousandths, and just like in front of the decimal point, behind the decimal point, the places can go forever and ever. So then you could have 10,000ths, 100,000ths, and so on. But in 5th grade, we really only work up to the thousandths place most of the time. And we will learn more about this in the next couple weeks, but I just want you to know the places for getting started today. Alright, so quick review of last week. We learned how to multiply whole numbers by powers of 10. So here we have the whole number 4, and we're multiplying it by 10 to the third power, which is the same as saying 10 times 10 times 10, which equals 1,000. So we are basically doing 4 times 1,000. And when we multiply that, we know that 4 times 1 equals 4, and then we add those 3 zeros. So we get a product of 4,000. Keep that in mind because we'll need it for the next slide. This problem, we didn't have that decimal point or the zero. It just equaled 4 whole. Now look at this problem. It is the exact same problem as the one we just did, but it looks a lot different. We still have this value of 4 wholes to start out with. Now, in here, we have a decimal point and a 0, but the value's not changing. Think about money. Whether you write $4 like this, or you write $4 like this, either way, you still have $4. And that's how decimal points work. When there's a 0 after it, it doesn't change the value, but it does change how we multiply things. So let's check it out. We have 4 wholes, and again, we're multiplying it by 1,000, 10 to the third power. But unlike what we did last time to solve it, we can't just do 4 times 1 equals 4, and then keep our decimal point in our 0 and add 3 more zeros. Because we know from the last slide that 4 times 1,000 equals 4,000. And this is not 4,000. So we multiply it a little bit differently. When we multiply and divide decimals, we need to move the decimal point. I'm going to put our 4 here that we're starting with. This exponent, or the amount of zeros, tells you how many times you're going to move your decimal point. You can see here that we will be moving our decimal point 3 times. Now we just need to figure out which way to go. Well, we are multiplying 4 by a number that is greater than 1. So that means that our answer is going to be greater than what we started with. It's going to be bigger. So to make this number bigger, we need to move our decimal point back. Think about money. If we had $4 and we moved our decimal point back to the right, that would change it to $40. If we moved it to the front, to the left, it would change it to 40 cents. So if we're multiplying to make it a greater or a larger number, we need to move our decimal point to the back. And remember, I said that the exponent or the amount of zeros tells you how many times you're moving it back. So we are going to move this one back 3 times. Let's do it together. 1, 2, 3. We have these empty spaces here, And anytime you have an empty space with your jumps, you fill it in with zeros. And I'll teach you the long way to do this in a couple weeks from now. We don't know how to multiply decimals yet, so we're kind of working backwards. You're learning the trick first, and then we'll learn the long way later. And now we rewrite our product so it's not all sloppy. So when we rewrite it, we see that we end up with 4,000, which we know is correct. We know that 4 times 1,000 equals 4,000. Let's try another one. Now we have 4 1/10 times 1,000, or 10 to the third. Same idea. We know that we want our number to be greater than what we're starting with because we're multiplying it by 1,000. So we're going to move our decimal point back to the right. And there are 3 zeros, and we have an exponent of 3, so we're moving that decimal point 1, 2, 3 times. Fill in your empty spaces with 0, rewrite your product, and you get 4,100. Let's go the opposite direction now. Here we have 175,000 divided by 10 to the second power. And you guys learned last week that our trick for this was we crossed out however many zeros were in the exponent. So we crossed out 2 zeros and ended up with a quotient of 1,750. But again, you won't always be able to do that. Sometimes you'll have a decimal point, or sometimes you'll have a number that doesn't have all these zeros on the end. So we need to figure out how to divide it without just crossing off zeros. Here's an example of that. We have 175. We're dividing it by 10 to the second power, but there's no zeros to cross out. And I just can't cross out 2 places. That would leave me with 1. And we know that that's not the correct answer. So let me show you how we are going to do this. We're starting with 175. We need to move our decimal point. And you're probably like, Miss Carter, there is no decimal point. Well, this is a whole number. And think about money. If you have $175, but then you wanted to add some cents to it, where would you put your decimal point? You would put it right here after the whole. So when we need to move our decimal point and there's not one, we just add it right there at the end of the whole. Now we can move it. Our exponent still tells us how many times to move it, and our symbol, our operation, tells us which way to move it. Since we're dividing this time, our number is going to be getting smaller. So we're going to move the decimal point to the front 2 times. Now we rewrite our quotient, and we have 1/75. Let's do another one. Here we have 17 5/10. Again, we're dividing. We're making our number smaller, so we're going to move our decimal point to the left, and we're going to move it 2 times. So when we move it 2 times, we end up with 1, 2. Our new quotient is 175 thousandths. All right, so now I want you guys to practice. We have 14 5/10 times 1,000. Pause this recording and then press play when you're ready to check your answer. Okay, let's check your answer. So we're starting with 14 5/10. We're multiplying, so we know this number is going to be getting bigger, and we're multiplying by 1,000. Now, I know we don't have an exponent here, so you're probably like, how many times do I move the decimal point? But remember, we know that 1,000 is the same as 10 to the third power, because there are 3 zeros. So we're going to move that decimal point 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Place our decimal point, fill in the empty spaces with zeros, and then we rewrite our product. And after you rewrite it, it makes it easy to see where you need to go back and add in a comma. Now, some of you might put a decimal point on the end there, and that's okay. That does not change the value of your answer. But usually, when we have a whole number with nothing left over, we leave that decimal point off because there's nothing coming after it. Let's do another practice one. Again, pause this recording and press play when you're ready to check your answer. Okay, let's check it. We are starting out with 179, and we're dividing by 10 to the fourth. Since we're dividing, we need to make our number smaller, and we need to move that decimal point 4 times. So we're moving it 1, 2, 3, and 4. Fill in the empty space with a 0 and rewrite your quotient. Now again, you can put the 0 at the end if you want to, or you can take it off. It has the same value. We have 179 10,000ths. One more practice one. Pause the recording, press play when you're ready to check your answers. Alright, so we're starting with 149, a whole number here. And we are dividing by 10 to the 5th. This is one of those times where we don't have zeros to cross out and we don't have a decimal point to move. But since it's a whole number, we know that we can place a decimal point right there at the end, and now we can move it 5 times. We are dividing. Our number's getting smaller, so our decimal point's going to move to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Fill in those empty spaces with zeros and rewrite your quotient. Please, 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 please use scratch paper for this. It is so easy when you're trying to do it in your head to move over one space too many or not move over enough spaces, and it will throw off your whole answer. So now that you guys have had some practice, I want you to go to Edmodo, and you have a quick quiz on there. And it's just asking you if you watched this video, and then giving you some practice problems just like the ones we just did. And that will give me or your math teacher a really good idea of how much we need to review in class, or if you're ready to move on to using this skill in different ways. So again, your teacher's name will be right here if I'm not your teacher, and this is the title. Please go complete that now. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you guys have a great day. Bye!